good to be with you again as we draw near to the end of our Loving Exodus series, and it's been great doing it with you. I hope it's been good for you. This evening and next week we are going to be looking at the garments that the priests wore. And I love this whole book of Exodus. There is so much relevance, there is so much that is applicable. But I think the thing that I find, and this is maybe not the best way to describe it, but the thing that I find so intimate about this book of Exodus, so personal, is when we look at the garments that the priests wore. Firstly, because they're filled with prophetic nature, they're filled with typology that points to Jesus, who is the high priest. And then secondly, as the work of the Spirit of God, 2 Corinthians 3:18 says we are being transformed into his likeness. As we look at these garments that spoke of Jesus and spoke of his character and spoke of his role, they speak so much into us, into you and I, and into who the Spirit of God is making us into, making us like. There are two chapters in the book of Exodus, chapter 28 and chapter 39, devoted to these garments, and you please go and read them. And they explain that they describe the garments, and they're very specific as to what the garments were for and how they were to be made. And so please go and read it. I'm going to pick up 3 points tonight from these garments. And the first is this, is that the priesthood, of which Aaron was the first high priest, is a picture of Jesus. The Old Testament high priest, Aaron being the first, is a picture of the eternal high priest, Jesus Christ. And we're going to flip between Exodus and Hebrews, because the book of Hebrews is the New Testament book that brings through this Old Testament order of priesthood into the New Testament. And so in Hebrews chapter 4 it says, "For we do not have a high priest," he's comparing the high priesthood of Jesus with the old order of Aaron. He says, "We do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weakness, but we have one who has been tempted in every way as we are, yet was without sin. Let us therefore approach the throne of grace with confidence, that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in time of need." Friends, please meditate on those few verses from the end of Hebrews chapter 4. We do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weakness, but we have one who has been tempted in every way as we are, yet was without sin. We have this perfect priest, this perfect high priest, who is sinless, yet human, who has never done anything wrong, and yet who understands with our innate nature to do wrong. And then it says that we can approach this throne of grace with confidence. Interesting thing with thrones is that thrones are generally meant to distinguish the royal from the ordinary. And so thrones are big and they're intimidating, and you approach them, and thrones are meant to elevate the king and to humble the subject. Yet what we have in the person of Jesus Christ is a throne of grace where the king has been humbled so that the subjects are able to be elevated. So we see in Psalm 18 where David says, "You, Lord, have made me great." That's the nature of the throne of grace. And I think if we compare which Hebrews chapter 7 and chapter 9 do in depth, please read Hebrews 4, Hebrews 7, and Hebrews 9. What we see as the writer of Hebrews compares the old order of the high priest with Jesus, the eternal high priest, he basically says 5 or 6 different things. He says the old order of priests were sinners. The new high priest is sinless. The old order of priests offered the blood of an animal. The new order of priest, Jesus, offered his own spotless, priceless blood. The old order of priests had to offer a sacrifice and blood for his own sin and then the sin of the nation, Jesus, the high priest, never had to offer blood on behalf of himself. He offered blood on behalf of the people, of the world. The old order of priests entered into a literal tent, and there was a very significant but picture of the presence of God, whereas Jesus, the high priest, doesn't enter a tent, but he enters heaven itself with the blood. The old order of priests represented a covenant and a promise, and Jesus, as the high priest, brings in a new covenant and a new promise, which the book of Hebrews tells us is a better covenant and better promises. The old order of priests did their best and then they died. The new order of high priest, Jesus Christ, didn't do his best. He fulfilled perfection and he never ever dies. And so it's a beautiful, beautiful picture. This high priest, the old order of high priest, the picture that we have in the book of Exodus of blood being offered, of priests mediating, of priests having this reconciliatory role between the people and God, is all just pointing to this picture of Jesus, our high priest, who reconciles us, who obtains mercy and grace and forgiveness for eternity, never needing to be repeated. The second thing that I find so beautiful in these garments of the priests, or these two chapters, is what the garments were made of. And if you read it, please do, there were 5 not the word ingredients, that's what you use for a recipe. There were 5 different materials used in the making of the garments. Firstly, there was gold, then there was blue cloth, there was purple cloth, there was scarlet cloth, and then there was a white linen. 5 different materials: gold, blue cloth, purple cloth, scarlet cloth or deep red cloth, and then white linen. And each one of these, please do the study yourself, it's worth doing. Each one of these points to something very specific about Jesus. These different materials, and particularly their colors, are very significant. So we know that gold speaks of the divineness of Jesus. Gold is associated with extreme wealth. Gold actually in Hebrew comes from the word to shimmer or to shine, and so gold carries this sense of divine. So gold speaks of the divineness of Jesus. Blue speaks of the heavenliness of Jesus. We stand on earth and we look up into the heavens and the color is blue, and Jesus is from heaven. John 3:16, God sent his son from heaven. Purple speaks of the royalness of Jesus, and there's reasons why. Purple was a very expensive color, a very expensive dye to produce, and it was always associated, mainly due to its expense, with royalty. And so the gold speaks of divineness, the blue speaks of his heavenliness, the purple speaks of his royalness. There might be a better word to describe it. The scarlet speaks of his lifelessness. Now, if you look how scarlet cloth was made, in fact, the word scarlet, if you go and look at the Hebrew word used in Exodus 28 and in Exodus 39, the actual word for scarlet is crimson maggot. That's right, maggot, that little funny thing that looks a bit like a worm or a scrub, I think they call it. The word scarlet is made up of these 2 words, crimson worm or crimson maggot. And I don't have time to do justice to all the what's implied in this, but basically it was a little maggot that was the color of red, that died as it clung to a piece of bark, and its dye, because it would cling to a plant, its dye would ooze into that wood, and they would collect the dye from this crimson maggot. And that's where scarlet comes from. And there's just such a very profound, minute picture of Jesus. And so the color scarlet speaks of the lifelessness of Jesus in the sense that he lost his life on the cross. And then white linen speaks of his humanness. And I always, well, I never knew where linen came from, and I did a study on it, and to find out that linen comes from the flaxseed plant, or the flax plant, where we get our flaxseed from. And the process by which flax plants are turned into linen, quite a brutal process actually. And again, there is picture and type and prophetic nature of Jesus and his death. But the linen speaks of the very humanness of Jesus. And so we have here this high priest, Jesus, our Savior, Jesus, our high priest, Jesus who is God, and these materials speak again of his divineness, his heavenliness, his kingliness or his royalness, his lifelessness, and lastly of his humanness. And so please explore these materials of the garments for the high priest. The last picture I'd like to take from these garments is the 12 stones that were worn or attached to these garments in two particular places. There were 12 stones, each one representing the tribes. So when the stones are on the garment, it's speaking of the people. The names of the tribes were engraved on the stones. And the priestly garments had the 12 stones on the shoulders and the 12 stones on the breastpiece over the heart. Now, please get that. The high priest carried the people on his shoulders, and he carried them on his heart. On his shoulders and on his heart. And we know as we read the Gospels and we look at the life of Jesus that he carried not just the nation of Israel, but he carried the people of the world of all ages. He carried them on his shoulders, and in fact, very literally, when he carried the cross on his shoulders, and he carried them on his heart. There was this responsibility for the world within him. It moved him. We see it so beautifully in the Garden of Gethsemane. It's in his heart, and yet it was a very practical responsibility that Jesus bore in his daily living, in his discipling of people, in his caring of people, and ultimately in his bearing the cross on his shoulders. And friends, we look at these pictures and we appreciate Jesus carrying the world, carrying people, carrying you and I, carrying individuals on his shoulders and on his heart. And it's so beautiful to see that in Jesus, but it's a picture of you and I as believers, as priests, after the order of Jesus' priesthood, and particularly for those of us who are leaders, that we carry the church. We carry the mission of the church. We carry the unsaved. We carry them on our shoulders, and we carry them in our hearts. In other words, it's a responsibility, and many of you listening to this will know exactly what I'm talking about when I say that we carry people on our shoulders. There is a reality to being the healing community of God. There is a reality to being his church. There is a reality to being his leader, which means we carry people literally. We walk with them. We help them financially. We help them in their lives. We help, we carry, we get involved. We do not live isolated lives. Our front doors are wide open. Our lounges are open. Our dining room tables are open. We carry people on our shoulders. And at the same time, we carry them in our hearts. We care deeply, we feel deeply. And because we carry them in our hearts, we bring them before the Lord Jesus, for ultimately they are his people, they are his flock, they are his children. and he is their shepherd. And so I leave you with these beautiful pictures that we found in these two chapters. The picture of the high priest as a type of Jesus, the perfect high priest. The garments that Jesus wore, what they represent, the high priest wore, and what they represent in Jesus. And then finally, this picture of carrying the people on shoulder and carrying the people on heart, for that is what we are called to do. Thank you so much, guys. We'll carry on chatting now.